Good afternoon, Lagos, Nigeria, wherever you're joining us from. Welcome to Borderlines, the only show that takes you beyond borders. My name is Ireti Bakare-Yusuf. From the smoldering streets of Khartoum to ravaged towns of Darfur, Sudan's civil war rages on. But after 2 years of unimaginable devastation, are we finally witnessing a shift in momentum? The Sudanese armed forces are reporting major victories in the capital, Khartoum, while the paramilitary rapid force support forces digging deeper across Darfur. The battlefield is changing. But does that mean the conflict is nearing its end, or simply evolving in something even more dangerous? Today, for analysis, I'm joined all the way from Cardiff, Wales, United Kingdom, by Elbashir Idris, an independent Sudanese analyst who has been closely tracking the war from its every twist and turns. Let's get started. Welcome, Al-Bashir. How are you?
Hello there. Thank you for having me. I'm fine, thank
Thank
you. I
you
hope
for
you're well.
joining me. Thank you for joining me on Borderlines. So let's start straight away. Um, let's begin with the big picture. So many are saying the tide will be turning. The Sudanese army claims it's made major advances in Khartoum. But beyond the military statements, what's really shifting on the ground? Is this a turning point or just a change of tempo?
Well, it's certainly a turning point in terms of what we are going through next, though that doesn't mean it's a turning point for the better. The
Mm,
shift in the battlefield dynamics now will move from the center of the capital, Khartoum, where on the 26th of March of this year, the Sudanese army have managed to recapture and liberate its capital. However, now the main stage will be in Darfur, which is situated west of Sudan, and it's a region that borders Chad. This area, region, Darfur, is the home base for the rapid support forces for the Janjaweed, who committed the same atrocities of genocide just 20 years ago, and
hmm
now they're doing it again. And
Yeah.
so, what we're seeing here is a very complicated situation that could potentially end up in the fragmentation of Sudan, where the rapid support forces through its political arm named TASIS, that just last month or a month and a half ago signed a founding charter in Nairobi
Mm.
that had multiple militias with the RSF leading the helm to become this new parallel government in Sudan. And the problem with that is just 11 years ago, if anything, Sudan already had split from Sudan to South Sudan. And now looking at a situation
Your
where,
voice seems to be going low.
can you hear me now?
Yes. If you could just raise it a little bit more.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
how about this now? Yeah.
Yeah. I think your
Lovely.
voice is just lower than mine, but yes, go ahead.
No, this is the microphone. So in this case, we have the Sudanese armed forces really needing to. They cannot make a stalemate. That's their perspective. They cannot have a negotiation with these militia forces that it itself created, funnily enough, ironically, just 20 years ago, under the impression that this quasi state, this statelet, this new idea of a state would be rebellious and born out of bad blood, and it would create a period of further bloodshed and tension in Sudan. And if this new government actually realizes and becomes a country, then it will allow for further arms to be shipped into this country by the United Arab Emirates, which are the biggest backers of the rapid support forces, to continue on this onslaught. And the dynamics are that the forces of the Sudanese armed forces are starting to move towards the Darfur area, and very rapidly for an assault. Currently, Darfur, the region, is made up of 5 states in Sudan: North Darfur, South Darfur, Central, West, and East. Um, North Darfur is the last stronghold of the Sudanese armed forces in the region. Al Fashir is the capital of North Darfur state, and if Al-Fashir falls, essentially what we will see is the domination of the rapid support forces on the west of Sudan, and that is a scenario that I do not believe the Sudanese armed forces
If
would
I could
want.
just interrupt you a little bit,
Of course,
if you could go back, in fact, I think at this point it's important for our listeners to know that Sudan was one country, right?
yes,
And then it
yes,
divided. So I know you've been talking about the UAE, you've mentioned the UAE, and
yeah,
we've talked about possible progress. Let's
right,
go a little bit back. Sudan as a whole country.
right.
How did we get to South Sudan and North Sudan?
So we got there because of the 30-year regime that was involved, that took control of Sudan and did not give up power, but also because of Sudan's history. If we really have to be honest, we have to go back to the times of independence, and even before that, during the time of British colonialism. And the British were very good, as we all know, at divide and rule and conquer. And that happened in Sudan as well, where the north of Sudan were more Muslim populated, more Arabized Africans, whereas the south was more real Africans. And because of that, it's led to a sense of disunity where there is no national kind of identity. What is Sudan? What is the face of Sudan? And who gets to represent that? And unfortunately, it's been disproportionate in the representation from one side more than the other. That being the North, having more power, more representation, and holding more positions within government and access to money and technology, more compared to their southern counterparts. And because of that, it's what allowed them to become the face in front of the camera, you can say, or the face of the state. But at the same time, it's alienated a lot of the South Sudanese, and it's bred disunity, it bred racism, it bred colorism, and sectarian issues further became deeper. And so, since 1956, Sudan has been the country with the most longest civil wars in Africa, unfortunately. And it's because of these divisions that keep on wedging between the people. Now, where does this agenda come from? It could come from multiple sources, but essentially, it's been an Arabization, an Islamization project that has been pushed very, very strongly and hard, to the point it deterred people away. It made their own people push away. And unfortunately, the Sudanese government has not been the one to look after its own brothers and sisters, forcing them to flee from their own homes under this premise of you need to be more like us, which is certainly not correct. And eventually, after the first Sudan civil war that lasted for 22 years, the second Sudanese civil war that lasted for 20 years, and the conflict in Darfur also. But that's just in the West. In the South, eventually all compiled up in 2005 with the Juba peace, not the Juba peace agreement, with the comprehensive peace agreement, the CPA in 2005, which was signed by then Vice President of Sudan, who was the first Vice President of Southern Sudanese origin, Dr. John, who unfortunately died that same year after doing the signing. In that agreement, it was stipulated that there will be a referendum for the South Sudanese whether they want to have their own country or not. And the referendum was highly in favor of splitting and getting their own country. And in that scenario and case, the way, as we discuss it, these are civilian matters. This wasn't done through a military way. This was done through negotiations, through talks, through agreements. But in this case, in the happening now in Darfur, it's not looking like that. It's looking full on bloodshed to make sure they get their own country, which is much more dangerous. And so, because of the history and dynamics, even with South Sudan, the Rapid Support Forces and militia has found are trying to find ways to ally themselves with the South Sudanese to convince them to go against their former northern brothers. But
Okay.
if anything, that we've realized, this split has happened because of ideologies of political parties. But the people themselves, they understand the racism has destroyed their country. They understand the colorism and the sectarian issues has divided the people, and they do, and they see that if you ask any normal Sudanese person, Sudan and Junub Sudan, Sudan and South Sudan, we're one people, regardless.
Well, this
But
is it.
unfortunately. Mm.
Yeah, please finish your sentence.
But politicians always come the way in the way to create wedges
Mm.
for their own agendas.
You make a very good point, and I'm glad you mentioned colorism, and that's led to part of the disunity. Of course, we're also going to talk about resources. If this is a fight over the resource being based in the north or being based in the south, but so that we don't lose this, because to some people, the idea of colorism in an African country seems really very kind of opaque, and weird and odd and perhaps even not belonging. But of course, in countries like Sudan, it matters a great deal. Indeed, there's been quite a lot of campaign about dark-skinned Sudanese people not feeling represented in the news and the media, be it international or locally. Is it that Arab mix? Is it a case of, because of course you mentioned the Arabization, you mentioned the British, the colonialism. Can we blame that colorism on the fact that those who are lighter are from North Sudan, perhaps, and therefore they've been placed at the forefront, of having been better than those who are from North, or which is it? What would you say?
It's almost like that. This is the really scary part. So though the north and the south is like colorism, when we look over to the west, what we need to understand, let's look at it from a Middle Eastern view. This may sound a bit weird, but hear me out. If we were to think of Saudi Arabia as the center of the world, center of this Arabized world, right, of this
Mm-hmm,
Islamic,
mm-hmm,
and there's this project of Arabization,
mm,
Sudan would be considered a frontier country. It would be on the border, right? It would be on the frontier. So the Sudanese, all the way out in, say, the west of Sudan, which is far away from all these Arabized and Muslim neighboring nations, they see themselves as the ones who are going out to spread the message. But unfortunately, with them, their history is very violent.
mm.
The ones in the West, the Rapid Support Forces, are committing a genocide against African communities, against dark-skinned people in Sudan, the Masalit community in Darfur, because they don't look Arab. But
So
these
is this
Arab.
more a case of xenophobia rather than racism?
No, certainly, because
Mm,
this genocide, this ethnic cleansing with this. This isn't just
mm,
discrimination. This is loss of life in extreme numbers,
mm.
and this happened 20 years ago, and it's been going on ever since. To be honest, but now it's come back into the picture, and it's become even much more extreme and violent.
Okay.
And essentially, the Rapid Support Forces, though it may claim it's fighting in the name of democracy, fighting in the name
Mm,
of civil liberties and and democracy and all of that stuff, for the past 2 years, what we've seen is the complete opposite. What we've seen is a xenophobic, genocidal militia targeting, ethnically cleansing those that they do not see as pure like them. But simultaneously, they also play this game where they pander
mm.
to the instincts, to the emotions of those who have been wronged by the Sudanese state and Sudanese people to bring them on board. What does that mean? So there's a lot of in South Sudanese mercenaries with an old chip on their shoulder for obvious reasons, that have joined the fight against Sudan with the Rapid Support Forces, even though the Rapid Support Forces are being overly racist and xenophobic against people who look
Mm.
like them. So it's a weird one in this case. And unfortunately, it looks like because of these tribal divisions and lands, for those who don't know, Sudan
Oh,
is a country with about more
is your
than
camera still
200.
there? I
Yes,
can't
yes.
see you. I think,
I'm here. I'm
okay.
here. The The country has over 200 languages. It has over 300 tribes. It's very multi-ethnic and diverse. And the problem from the very beginning was that there was no
Mm.
national identity and unity to unify all of this. And if there was, it clearly wasn't enough because it represented one more than the other, as you say.
Okay.
Um, mm,
Let's talk about, or we come back to today, Khartoum,
mm,
formerly known as the heartbeat of Sudan, has now
mm,
become a ghost town. What's going
mm.
on there? Who's controlling things? What's the
Right,
division? How are
right. So
people surviving even?
they don't. People have died the most shameful of deaths, unfortunately, and that may be starving to death in their own homes because they're too
Mm.
scared to leave their own homes in case they get shelled or just randomly shot. We're talking about people who are dying on with diseases that have never been seen in a long time, such as polio. We're talking about people, and this was before it was liberated again. But this we're talking about a time when people were had no food and they had to feed off dogs, and the dogs were feeding off human flesh, and so it
Wow.
became a horrible cycle. You know, when it's unbelievable. There was a time when there was so much dead flesh in the streets of the capital that birds that migrate, that fly from Europe and they come to Africa, they would feast on the flesh of the dead bodies in the capital city before returning back to Europe, so they can spread diseases. But nobody was talking about that. This war is a medieval. It's worse than medieval. It's the worst war that's been seen in decades, in a very, very, very long time, and the response to it as well has been horrible. But in terms of the current situation right now in Khartoum, the international media will try to paint this as one side is bad, both sides are equally bad. Historically, yes. If anything, historically, one side is worse than the other. But the amount of carnage that we've seen for the past 2 years has created a new precedent that we've never seen, nobody has seen before. The reason why this war is so badly funded, so badly dealt with the humanitarian support is because Sudan is a large country. It's a very large country. Before it split, it was the 10th largest country in the world. You can fit multiple European countries within it.
Mm.
Thank God we live in a continent in Africa that is very large. But also at the same time, it can be a problem because it becomes a problem with logistics. It becomes a
Mm.
problem of getting the supplies into the area. And because the whole country is essentially a battleground and a battle zone, there's hardly any safe spaces. And so the safe spaces have been more in the east or north of Sudan, or if you're in
Right.
RSF territory, more in the Darfur area there. But that doesn't mean you're safe. It means
Mm.
that you can be targeted at any time. Intelligence can hunt you down at any time. This is wartime conditions, meaning power is might makes right in these situations. And the Sudanese people have never had that might in the first place. And that's why they did the revolution back in 2019. That's why they
Okay.
went against a 30-year dictatorship. That's why they said we don't want military dictatorships anymore, or Islamists, or any kind of political ideology that
Okay.
seeks to split the people apart. And so the situation in Khartoum, let's be, from what I've seen, the UN has had difficulty trying to move its resources and supplies into Khartoum during the time when it was captured by the RSF.
Mm.
But after the Sudanese armed forces has essentially taken control of the capital, we've seen a large influx of Sudanese who have been displaced internally and externally, returning back to the capital city, which is an excellent sign. And we've seen the UN officials themselves go back to the capital city, which is also an excellent sign within that.
Okay.
Though the situation before the war in Sudan wasn't great either. So to return things to normal would be to return things just just as they were
Okay.
before, which wasn't great either. And because of that, it's in a situation where it definitely needs to rebuild and restart
Okay.
and with fresh
Mm.
blood again. But in terms of the context in this war, um, the Khartoum capital city, yes, that's okay.
Okay.
But the Khartoum capital city is in something called Khartoum state. And Khartoum state has three cities. It's three cities with each other: Khartoum, Durman, and Bahri. Bahri has been cleared of the rapid support forces. Khartoum has been cleared of the rapid support forces. It's Durman, all the way out in the west of Durman, that still has pockets of rapid support forces there.
Right.
But once that's been cleared, then one can say that, okay, the whole Khartoum state has been cleared of the rapid support forces. But the main dynamic is people are moving to Elbashir. They're getting ready for the next phase of this war, and hopefully the last phase. But what happens in the next few weeks and months will change
We will
the
talk about that.
geography of everything. Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Let me talk to us about. So, right now, what we see is that the army is pushing into Khartoum and the RSF appear to be entrenching themselves in Darfur. Why is Darfur still so strategically important in this conflict? And does the capture suggest anything at all with
Well, if
regards to the longer game?
Well, let's look at geopolitically who's around Darfur. So to the north, we got Libya with General Haftar, who is also funded and supplied by the United Arab Emirates. To the west of Darfur, we got Chad. We got that has Debi, Mohammed Debi, that also is funded by those same actors. To just to the bottom of it, we have the Central African Republic, where Wagner and Russian militias have operated by the UAE, and as well with South Sudan, as well with recent deals of the UAE trying to make inroads into the country. Now, the reason why they're trying to take Darfur is because it's a strategic, important place. It can connect to multiple countries that I've just mentioned that all have the same benefactor. That will allow for an easier access between these groups and alliances to do what they want. And unfortunately, during my time in observing, I haven't heard of much development in much of these areas that I just mentioned
Right.
under the administrations, under whatever administration that is. But it's always backed by the UAE. It hasn't been a development kind of thing. It's been more of a resource extraction alliance, and these countries are part of a group, of a network of secessionists and counter-revolutionaries as well. But I'll touch on that later. The important aspect is the amount of resources within Darfur is ridiculous. We're talking about uranium. We're talking about all the way, not many people know this, but there is the world's largest freshwater reservoir is actually in Darfur, and it's all the way like deep down under the ground. The technology is still not out yet to dig it out, but essentially that water will be critical in the future for humanity, especially as global warming comes in. And these big countries understand that, especially the UAE, which has resource issues. They only
Of
have
course,
petrol
there's a
and
lot
oil.
of water issues in the Middle East. Yes.
Right, exactly. And for them to secure their future, it would be to throw countries in Africa into chaos, so it can be easier for them to go in and just extract the resources at no price, or even better, at a very low price. And for example, we're seeing that in this war in Sudan with gold. Sudan has a lot of gold, and a lot of fertile agricultural land, and because of it, it was once considered the breadbasket of the Middle East and Africa, but due to bad management and corruption,
Okay.
it became very bad. But on
Go ahead. Finish your sentence.
I'm going to say a very controversial thing, but this is from my own research, from what I found. This isn't just as black and white as it seems between external actors who are playing the battlefield in Sudan. So, just for your viewers to know, external actors for Sudanese armed forces, we have Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, even Iran, and China. And then for the rapid support forces, we have Chad, Uganda, Kenya, United Arab Emirates. And these countries have their connections with the West, and the West gives them diplomatic covering. This is why you don't hear much of the atrocities in Western
so
media.
let's talk about that. It
Mm,
appears you're saying that the RSF has more African backing, with the exception of the UAE. And of course, the military have more Arab
right.
backing, Middle Eastern backing.
Yes.
Now, when you say the West, that who is being backed by and which West, which country in the Western Hemisphere is doing this?
America, UK, Germany, the EU.
Okay,
These countries are involved. These countries are involved as
okay. So these countries being involved, then tell me something. Is it about the water, about the gold, or all the resources? Of course, we
well.
understand why the water, especially, would be, important for the UAE, but the Western countries, what is their interest?
The Sudanese government and state is dangerous to the existence of Israel, and it's always been that. And especially the Islamists, since they've been in for 30 years, they've been trying to find every single way to get them out. And if we were to dig deeper into this, then we would see there is a certain country, Israel, within the region that knows how to play the game very, very well. And if Sudan or the Sudanese state or the government is seen as a threat towards the existence of Israel, then they have to go in terms of the bigger picture, in terms of the West. But also, it's a very large slice, a very
Mm,
large cake. Everybody wants a slice of the cake in Sudan for their own reasons. I like to think of it as during COVID, we all know a person who has $1,000 or something or has a lot of money, and if they take $100 out of that thousand, they suddenly act as if they've lost all the money in the world. And that is the response Western countries have had when COVID happened. They felt that COVID took away their economic kind of power and they need to rebuild it back up. And there's no easier country to bully than one already in chaos, where you can
okay.
extract the resources very quickly.
Interesting that you mentioned Israel. Recently, there was an interview with a four-star general, Wesley Clark, who is an American four-star general. And I think he said that the plan that he had seen as far back as the 1990s, so perhaps 1991, which was a plan of countries that needed to be reportedly, according to the interview, that needed to be invaded, or if you like, and that's for want of a word, it was Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Sudan.
And there you are then. Such things don't disappear. Such things stay in the back in the archive until somebody picks it up again and says, "Hey,
So
this is
you're
the plan."
saying, so what you're alleging, or what you're saying, according to your research and analysis, is
Mm,
a strong Sudan is a
mm,
danger for Israel.
yes, because the brand of Islam in Sudan isn't one where that it's easily influenced
Is it a
by
Shia or Sunni?
it's Sunni, but more Sufi, if anything. But at the same time, it rejects the Wahhabism, the Salafism, the extremism that we see from the Middle Eastern countries. Of course, we're a very diverse country. Not everybody can be an
Exactly.
extremist from over there.
Exactly.
And so the that kind of they will try many different ways to infiltrate, maybe through culture, religion, politics, whatever. But also, it's what that level of fear is what kept the Islamists in power at the same time. So the Islamists,
Right.
and that's not. I'm not saying against Islam. There's a difference between those who practice religion
There's a
and those
difference
who
between
force
Islam and
religion.
Islamists, of
Yeah,
course.
100%.
Yes.
And these Islamists are using the name of Islam for their own political agendas, whilst
Mm.
hurting everybody else, which is bad for in the whole picture of things. Um, but in this case, what I'm saying is that, and I'll actually say, this okay, 6 years ago we had a revolution in Sudan in 2018, 2019.
Right.
This revolution happened because of mismanagement within the country, because the lack of or rather the amount of corruption, and people couldn't feed themselves, they couldn't get water, things were getting expensive, highly expensive. And so what eventually happened, the straw that broke the camel's back after decades in these conditions were people getting hungry. But
Mm.
how did we get there in the first place? We need to ask that. And that is through the international sanctions that the US put on Sudan over 25 years ago, 30 years ago, putting sanctions on Sudan for claiming that they're a state of terrorism, a sponsor of state terrorism
Mm.
act. That sanction really destroyed Sudan, as well with
Right.
US interference in 1997, where they destroyed something called the Yarmouk factory. And the Yarmouk factory was the only factory in Sudan that was producing its own pharmaceuticals and medicine. And so the US bombed it in 97, claiming that it was a weapons manufacturing factory, which wasn't. It was a pharmaceutical one. But that happened at the same time as Bill Clinton was having his scandal with Monica Lewinsky. And so to hide away from the press and to move public interest away from the scandal, he decided to bomb Sudan and move the media attention towards that to hide from his own scandal. All of these connect and add up.
Right.
And so
Right.
what this created, the international sanctions, it created a pressure cooker, it created an oven, and eventually it would implode because you're not getting food in, you're not getting imports in. The
Mm.
rest of the world is going forward. People are seeing that, but your own people, they're getting frustrated now. And so that they created the conditions for the pressure cooker to explode. And that exploded in 2019, 2018. So as
Right.
much as the Sudanese people see that the revolution is theirs, there are external actors outside that view that revolution as actually theirs. And that external actor is Washington. Um, but at the same time, Washington then decided to give the contract of Sudan, how to deal with Sudan, to the UAE. And the UAE essentially since mid 2010s, they've been very diversifying their portfolio into not tourism, let's say, but
Right.
definitely more into aggressive things. And one of those has been the Rapid Support Forces, which they hired to use in Yemen as mercenaries back in 2015 when Saudi Arabia and UAE were having a proxy war with each other. Once again, we are caught in the middle of an Arab proxy war that we have to fight with our own bloods and we have to
Indeed.
die for. We don't realize that. And so it's happening again. The
Yeah.
UAE is supporting the Rapid Support Forces. The Saudis are supporting the army, but it's Sudanese bodies that are caught in the middle and are dying. And for what? Um, but given the nature, the genocidal nature, and the acts that we've seen for the past 2 years, for the past 732 days, I've been counting, it's undeniable now that there has to be not only a stop, but there needs to be an end to the idea of militias, not only
Mm.
in Sudan but across Africa as well. But that will come when the militaries decide not to be selfish and egotistical and decide to become professional,
Mm.
just and a responsible army. And that is something that every African and every human being should deserve from those who claim to protect them. They
Okay.
Professionalism needs to be there. Justice needs to be there. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that. And when you don't have professionalism, you get militias that pop
Yeah.
out of nowhere. And so your monopoly of violence within the state
Mm.
disappears. Goes. You're not the one calling the shots anymore. It's somebody
Thank you.
else in another region.
2 years, as you said, some 15 million people have been killed in West Darfur since the start, 8.5 million displaced. Let's talk about humanitarian. Aid groups say they've been blocked, starved of access, and in some cases, targeted. Why hasn't the humanitarian relief been able to get into the camps? Why has it become a dangerous place to take urgent humanitarian aid?
because because bullets aren't the only things that kill. Starvation and famine does as well. And so that's controlled by the Humanitarian Aid Commission, HAC, of Sudan. This is the government body that essentially signs off to the humanitarian orgs to allow them to work. Now, HAC has politicized and has weaponized aid. It always has, but now it's done so even more, where they would rather, if there is an area that they deem to have a lot of RSF within it, they would rather have the aid blocked. So they don't get food. It will affect the civilians as well, but as long as the RSF don't get aid and supplies, so their collaborators and agents, but that also means it will kill off anybody else who's innocent. And unfortunately, aid is a thing that can become weaponized, and in this sense, it's the slow bureaucracy. They do it on purpose. Like I've personally went to the embassy, Sudanese embassy in Kenya. Now, the Sudanese embassy in Kenya is where you go if you want to get a visa for humanitarian reasons to enter Sudan, if you're an organization. I've spoken to many aid workers, and I went there myself, and they would say, "Oh, it's taking a long time." So it will take 3, 4, 5, 6 months, even more, for those who are experts in the fields of, say, rehabilitation, of food, of medicine, of agriculture. These global experts would wait months just to get a visa. And then eventually, when they do get a visa, they go in and they stay for like a month or two. So they don't have that much time to stay there.
Okay.
It takes a long time to even get in. And so it's this deliberate blockade and deliberate obstacles of humanitarian
So
aid.
you're actually saying that you've used the word genocide. What
Yes.
you're saying is hack is
Yes.
actually complicit in the genocide that's going on by way of enforcing a famine. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying essentially that because of the way they enforce it and the way they have been very slow, they are complicit in that due to the state bureaucracy. But the genocide that is specifically located is within West Darfur with the Masalit people. And even the US have admitted that and said, well, hey, there's a genocide going on over there, and implicated Hemeti Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, the commander of the Rapid Support Forces, for genocide, but also Burhan, Abdel Fattah Burhan, the commander of the SAF, also for genocide. And these two men, who are fighting each other now, they used to be allies that committed genocide together back in Darfur 20 years ago. So what we're looking at are two genocidees who are fighting each other. And of course, if you're a genocider once, I don't think you're going to care again about how many people you kill. And so we're seeing that again. And essentially with HAC, they have been very slow and very corrupt. And because of that, it's their responsibilities as a state organ and as a state body can certainly lead them towards being complicit in this genocide.
We have so much to cover and we're fast running out of time, so you will have to come back. Let's talk about failed peace efforts of Jeddah, IGAD, AU mediations. Why have all these talks collapsed? I beg your pardon?
Let's talk about the one yesterday. Yesterday in London.
Indeed. The one yesterday in the UK. Indeed.
Yes. There was one in London, and that failed.
And even more so, whilst we talk about that, I'm glad, we must talk about the fact that the African Union was a co-host, not the main host.
Right. In the UK as well.
Yes,
and
in the
so
UK. If the UK was supposed to be involved, they should be coming to Africa as a co-host, and Africa should be the main host.
But here's the funny part: the belligerents themselves weren't even invited. So this was a conference between the actors, the external actors, the international community of the world, but not the fighters. So it had KSA, it had UAE, it had Egypt, it had whoever, but it didn't have a person from the Rapid Support Forces or a person from the SAF or a Sudanese person there. This makes me feel like it's the 1885 Berlin Conference again, just happened in 2025 without African voices being there. And yesterday, the reason why it failed so badly was because they couldn't even agree with each other. The main backers, Egypt and UAE and KSA, could not agree with each other on a statement that they could all share. And a state, or they couldn't agree to even form a contact group. So essentially, if the international community wanted to like contact those in the main backers, there's a group. These are the main backers of either side of the war. Let's talk to them to try and solve this issue. Even those guys couldn't come together to form a contact group. And so, what it shows is that African agency, Sudanese agency, really does seem to be taken for granted by these powers that be. And
I think I have to even ask, how let down do the Sudanese feel as Africans? How let down do they feel about the AU? Because it is significant that in the 2020s, we are still talking about, and your reference is correct, the Berlin Conference. How let down should we even feel? Because if one bleeds, everybody bleeds. We are all African. You're talking to me from Nigeria. Even if you're in the UK, you are Sudanese. We are both Africans. How angry should we be? How let down as the African Union be to the progress of Africa right now, especially given the conflicts? We still have Congo that's going on.
We still, right? And they haven't been responding with that effectively as well. And funny enough, with the Congo one, if you look at the external backers, it's the same ones again. It's the same people again. It's the UAE involved. It's them trying to resource extract it through very violent ways. And they have a very stupid way of doing things. And in terms of the AU, of course, it's a massive shame because unfortunately the AU seems to the officials within it seem to be easily bribed by whatever money that comes their way to influence whatever policies. And we've seen that with the amount of negotiations they've tried to deal with Sudan, and especially with the AU into the mix, trying to deal with it. But the AU had always, in this context, was following a wording, a narrative, a more line of thinking that wasn't African, that was more so within UAE's kind of thinking, which don't care about Africans at all. If you don't believe me, just go to UAE. I've never been, but from what I've seen and heard or whatever, not seen
I have
physically.
been, and I totally understand where you're coming from.
You know what I mean? So if they're treating people like that over there, Africans like that, how do you think they're going to treat them back home in their home countries and continent? And how they view them? And so the AU, I have no trust in. I have no hope in it. And as unfortunate to say, because I cannot recall, please correct me if I'm wrong, but can you recall a time when the AU has an achievement in solving a crisis?
Perhaps as far back, I can't recall anything but ECOMOG.
Okay, fair enough.
That was the last time. Yes.
And when was that? In the 60s,
Indeed.
70s, or 80s?
Indeed. That was during our ruler Abacha's time. Yes.
Right. And
it's a long, which is a long time ago. What, 30 years or so?
There you are.
Yes.
Then. And so like the African Union in itself as a body, we should have a United States of Africa. We shouldn't have a united an African Union. No, it's supposed to be much more united. We would have had passports, for Africans to allow each other to travel all over the place. So I don't find much hope within the AU. More so because they're getting barking orders from outside of Africa. The international community is toothless. The UN has essentially become toothless, and so are sanctions, and so is the ICC. The ICJ, funnily enough, on the 10th of April, so just last week, the Sudan took the UAE to the International Court of Justice.
That was going to be my next question, but yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. It's a good
sure thing. And this, I found a very interesting analysis. The UAE is being taken to the ICJ by Sudan for genocide and for helping them arming the rapid support forces and being complicit in it. Let's look back 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. Number one, there's a man named Sheikh Tahnoun, the spy master of the UAE. He went to the White House just a few weeks ago to do an investment with Donald Trump for over $1.4 trillion, right, for the next 10 years. The Saudis have made are pledging an investment of $1 trillion to the US for the next 5 years. President Trump, ever since he's come in, the whole idea of liberal kind of, well, just even during Biden's time, he destroyed the idea of international law because the way they've responded in Palestine and Gaza and other places, and even Sudan. Trump has fully destroyed that. He believes in bargains. He believes in power plays. He believes in strong arming. It's a tug of rope with him. It's not morals. And in this case, we're dealing with these Arab guys, leaders, with trillions willing to invest into the US. Okay, what does this mean in the bigger picture? UAE wants to invest 1.4 trillion to the US. That means it's buying influence. That means it's buying credit from them. That means it's buying whatever it wants. So now it's getting diplomatic immunity and covering from the US because it's giving them money. But now the KSA is also giving them money, and trying to buy them off. And Trump is loving it, right? Because he's a businessman, he's a negotiator, he's a deal maker, or whatever that is. And in this case, it's very interesting to see how the petrodollar is influencing geopolitics as well, and this new petrodollar from the belligerent external actors. They're trying to buy off, Trump. They're trying to buy off America. Yesterday in the London conference, not yesterday in the London conference, in the an article come out by The Guardian, it was revealed, it came out yesterday, 2 days ago, it was revealed by a leaked UN diplomat, a senior diplomat, that the UN panel of experts report on Sudan, which has to be objective and has to be neutral and has to, all of that. The leak said that in the initial report, it mentioned UAE many, many times. Now, all of a sudden, UAE has been wiped from the report. How? Like, we have numerous evidences of OSINT, of satellites, of photos, of videos, of testimonies, of confessions, of literally implicating UAE's involvement. Now, how is it that the UAE suddenly, their name has suddenly disappeared from a UN report? This just goes to show how much money can make the world turn around. Indeed. And especially in the world of international tariffs that Trump has put in, all these other nations, especially Western nations, they're looking anywhere to get money.
But before we close, because I have literally 5 minutes left with you, unfortunately, how aggressive is the Sudanese UN member? How aggressive are they? Because you've got this report that you said the UAE all of a sudden has disappeared. They're no longer mentioned. But of course, Sudan, both South Sudan and North Sudan, have members in the United Nations. How aggressive, how active are they?
I would say they're aggressive when it comes to the national security, to the Security Council. So they got their allies, Russia, China, over there, and the idea that they want to, the narrative that they say is that we need to protect Sudanese sovereignty and statehood, which is essentially the borders and the idea of a state and the government and everything like that. Whereas another argument, the counter argument towards that would be, well, the Sudanese state has been in charge for so long, and look at all this damage they've done. Clearly, they're not responsible enough to look after their own people. So why are we fighting for territorial integrity and sovereignty when clearly you can't even look after this country? And so the Sudanese UN are very aggressive when it comes to these kind of notions, or anything that may impact or hurt the statehood and the sovereignty of the state of Sudan. They're very against that. But that means you're balancing things now. What's more important, state sovereignty or human lives? That's the issue here now. It's like, do we want to send in UN peacekeepers to international protection of civilians? if we do that, okay, great, protect the civilians, but would that hurt Sudanese sovereignty again? Similar to the UN mission in Darfur, UNAMID, that ended in 2020, but that didn't hurt Sudanese sovereignty. Essentially, there's a whole cognitive dissonance here between what's more important, land or life. And the ones in the UN want to stick with the land, and the ones who claim want to help Sudan are saying they want to do it for the life. But there's a lot of people here claiming they want to do it for the life, but those very same people who are claiming they're doing it for the life happen to be those same ones who are backing the rapid support forces on their onslaught as well. So there's a lot of weird twists and turns that we've seen.
Indeed, it's very complicated, but of course, if only every party, all the actors involved, be it internal or external, especially the internal ones, would actually put the people first and always remember human lives matter beyond politics. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Elbashir Idris, independent analyst from Sudan, who joined me all the way from Wales in the United Kingdom. Thank you so much for being on Borderlines.
Thank you for having me and listening.
We appreciate you, and we will get you back.
Please. Thank you.
Take care.